Well, welcome back to Conflict of Interest. Tonight we're talking about the Australian economy and the task ahead of it. And is Wayne Swan a man for the job? Julie Novak joins us. Julie is a research fellow at the Institute of Public Affairs in Melbourne. She's a former Commonwealth Treasury official and has done a lot of work on Commonwealth-state relations. Julie, you've got a little tip for Wayne for his next press conference, I understand.
Yes, indeed. I think the appropriate aid for Treasurer Swan would be to have his Treasury flunkies provide a set of flashcards at the back of the press conference.
That's a good idea.
So 3.5% inflation rate next year, Swanee.
Yeah, you won't get that wrong again. No. I like that. I think it's a good idea, and I think that we ought to send this segment of the program to the Treasurer's office immediately.
Yeah,
they should start work.
Burn a DVD.
They should start work. We should burn a DVD and start work. More seriously, though, these are very difficult times. I mean, Peter and I were discussing before the break that, when Labor came into office, things were booming. They've now busted, as it were. Is Wayne Swan the man for the job? And how do you think the government's going so far in terms of the way it's trying to insulate Australia from the global economic crisis?
In terms of the second question first, I mean, if transactors in the economy want to save more and are thinking of spending less, I don't think any amount of government spending or deposit guarantees and the like are going to help if that's what people think they ought to do.
So it's psychological.
And I think
exactly.
That's because they're nervous.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And I don't think any government in that context will be able to hold back people's decision making. I don't think that to date, I don't think they've made a really good fist of things. If you think about the $10.4 billion fiscal stimulus package, well, eventually that has to be financed by something. There is no free lunch. It has to be financed by taxation. Some of the elements of the package are up for criticism too.
So where does it come from? I mean, I don't understand all this, but I mean, does that just come out of the budget surplus? Or what?
Well, yes, and it comes out of the 2008-09 budget. If you look at the mid-year economic outlook closely, you'll see that pretty much government expenses are increasing by almost the same amount of the $10.4 billion. But the danger is, obviously, of course, is that revenue forecasts are going down as well. So that's an issue there. And of course, in terms of deposit guarantee, well, that's a complete fiasco.
But those people who had their money invested in the finance funds, are they still frozen?
Yes, effectively.
And that seems to have gone off the news. So is that a permanent condition?
Well, not completely off the news, because in the Fin Review the other day, there was an interesting table which actually had shown that about $15 billion worth of investments in mortgage funds, investment funds are still frozen. There are still issues.
But that's just.
But the freezing of that money surely psychologically would play into the sort of fear factor in the point you made earlier, and Peter made, which
well,
was
it was
that,
worse
people
than that,
will not spend.
Because the reason that it was frozen was because they gave 100% guarantee to the banks.
Correct.
Now, people are saying, well, if the banks are safe, and we've been told how wonderful the banks are, why do you need to guarantee them? If they're safe.
Exactly.
What are you guaranteeing them against?
Do you think that Swan and Rudd were wrong to guarantee the banks?
Oh, look, I mean, I think given that they proclaimed just even a couple of months ago that Australia's regulatory settings through APRA and ASIC and the Commonwealth Treasury was all over the issue, I think the deposit guarantee issue illustrates just how readily government can get things wrong.
It's a panic move, and then it's subject to a law of unintended consequences,
Absolutely.
I think.
By having an unlimited guarantee, that actually encourages funds to be flighted, basically, from those deposits that are not guaranteed.
Can I just ask you this, because it's just fascinated me on that topic. It seems to me, and as I keep saying, I know nothing about all this, it seems to me that this means that the banks have got a lot more deposits.
Yes.
Okay, and that's good. The banks would like that.
Sure.
But they haven't paid any premium to the government for this. It's been a gift, hasn't it?
Well, I mean, Wayne Swan, in the flurry of policy measures, proposed a $1 million proposed insurance premium, on deposits greater than $1 million.
Yeah, but when it was granted, it really came out of the blue, and really it was the government giving the banks a truckload of money.
Well, it basically ensured that the banks had a AAA risk rating, because basically a government guarantee has the highest.
But what I'm trying to say is, where's the quid pro quo? What did the banks pay to the government or to the community to get these benefits? Nothing.
Well, I mean, that's probably right.
I mean,
That's probably
in a
fair call.
capitalist economy, it seems very strange to select 4 institutions, namely the banks, give them billions of dollars and higher credit ratings, and they pay nothing for it. I mean, they must have been wrapped.
Well, I'm sure they'd be very happy. And in fact, I think that it seemed to me the bank guarantee and the sort of fiasco that's gone on since seemed to me to say something about the inexperience of Swan and Rudd, and the fact that Australia, in a sense, is unlucky. Although it's not their fault in this sense, it was just the electoral cycle. Australia, in a sense, is unlucky. We don't have a Gordon Brown, who has, on the other hand, shown himself to be very adept, in handling the crisis in the UK. We don't. We certainly are in a position where we've got an inexperienced government coming into what must surely be, Julie, the toughest budget in 20 years. Just on the budget coming up, how difficult is it going to be for Wayne Swan on the one hand to keep economic credibility and on the other hand to get some stimulus into the economy to get things moving?
Well, I mean, the problem now is that there isn't really effectively too much room to move in terms of the next budget. We have an underlying cash balance of about $5.5 billion.
Now, what does that mean, a cash balance for?
Well, a cash balance is basically in excess of revenue over expenses. I mean,
yep.
Yeah, it's very.
So we've got about 5.5 billion.
Money in the bank.
Money in the bank.
Exactly.
We've got about 5.5 billion.
Cash in the bank.
Yep.
There's not much going around. And we've even seen last week new policy commitments by the government, including a $22 million bailout of ABC Learning.
Yes.
There are a couple of new measures hidden in the mid-year economic outlook. They're really banking on the hope that revenues will, still be reasonably healthy, but that's really an open question.
That's almost certain revenues are dropping.
They must drop. They must drop.
Well, they have to. If economic activity is declining, you would get lower tax collections. So this is a really, really interesting issue.
Julie,
Is there anything wrong with budget deficits?
My preference would be not to have budget deficits, because it's really inherently in the incentive of politicians to have a deficit.
But this is a crisis. Would it really matter if we had a budget deficit of 20 billion each year for the next 4 years?
Well, I mean, what that will inevitably do is to place upward pressure on interest rates, and I think homeowners would not be gleeful for that.
But just to come back to that, I mean, it seems to me that it almost became a fetish, budget surpluses, state and Commonwealth governments. And in fact, Peter was talking before about Victoria, where they have run pretty sensible economic policy and budget policy. But the lack of infrastructure spending now is a critical
problem. But you're
problem.
always going to have a budget surplus if you spend nothing on infrastructure, nothing on the future.
Yeah.
If it's all kept in the bank today.
Oh, there was a lot of spending at the state level. I mean, much of it was actually directed towards recurrent ongoing expenditure, wages and salaries for bureaucrats, for example.
Yeah, but
so
not on
So too many
present
bureaucrats,
priorities.
so they should be making cuts into the size of the public sector.
Wasteful spending.
Wasteful spending, and then spending that on infrastructure. You'd prefer to see that than running your budget into deficit
Sure,
for infrastructure spending.
And to see any encouragement, if at all possible, for private sector provision and participation in the delivery of infrastructure.
Well, while we're talking about the states, we've now got Labor governments going to elections in Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania, all within the next 2 years, I think. GST revenues are going to be down.
That's correct.
So this is a serious problem for the Labor
And
Party.
federal grants are going to be down.
And the federal
aren't they?
grants will be down.
Yeah, that really underlines the fiscal dependence of the states in modern times upon the Commonwealth. So they have a reduction in GST revenue. There's expected to be a reduction in their own taxes, like stamp duty.
Stamp duty on house sales.
Correct.
Yep.
Payroll tax might go down if unemployment goes up, which is projected. So there are serious issues. I mean, in recent years, essentially states have just waited for the revenue to roll in because of commodity prices. Now the revenue is starting to trickle down, there is a real issue.
I mean, the question is what they've done with that money.
Well,
Yeah,
can
I
you
I mean,
put
they're
us
running
on-
up these huge surpluses.
We
What have
really
they done
have
with it?
to wind up this segment for a moment. So can we come back to the question?
I think we'll
which
keep you on, Julie, which is...
which is the big question. What have they done with the money?
Yeah, and also I think the other issue we should address, because we have raised this issue,
climate
is
change.
climate change, and what now happens on the issue of climate change.
Okay, well, we will be back in a few minutes with these fascinating issues which are going to actually affect your hip pocket.